Okay. Okay, thank you for joining today's webinar sponsored by CHSS Career Services, preparing for virtual engagements. I'm your presenter, Jeff Poulos. Some of you, it seems, I've probably spoken with throughout our time here. We're going to be going over some really kind of interesting topics, but also some stuff that hopefully you already know in regards to preparing for virtual engagements, best practices, things like that. I do just want to say real quick, save the questions for at the end. Don't chat them in. We can review them at the end, and we can discuss other topics and things as well. So, which I said earlier, I don't anticipate us going the entire hour. So here we go. Preparing for virtual engagements. This should work here. Cool. Okay. So it's going to be action-packed what we're doing today. But like I said, I hope that it is content. Maybe it's some new content you're learning, but I hope it is content that you have already seen or have heard about, especially with everything being virtual today with the pandemic. So that word is used quite a lot. But following this webinar, I just want to lay out what you'll be able to walk away with and what you'll understand. So you understand how to strengthen your virtual interviewing with tips and tricks. And I know this isn't a webinar that's devoted or a workshop that's devoted to specifically to virtual interviewing, but I do want to take the moment to say that virtual interviewing is in itself or in a way considered a virtual engagement, right? I think the standard interview, what we once knew, may not be something of the new modern era now. Getting a phone call, going in person, things like that. I think interviews these days are maybe the phone call piece will still remain, but there'll be some sort of virtual Skype, Zoom, type of component. Preparing for actual virtual events, and we'll kind of talk about that, virtual events, right? Career fairs, maybe info sessions, engagements such as this one that you're in right now, right? So pat yourself, praise yourself, pat yourself on the back for being here, but this is considered in itself a virtual event, so that's good. Looking for these events, right? Obviously you're here, so that plays to the pat yourself on the back point. So, you looked for the event on Hire Red Hawk, or you saw one of the emails we blasted out regularly, which I know we flood your inbox from all different angles. So definitely check it out before you swipe left and delete those emails. But we're going to talk about networking and how that fits into looking for those events too. And then also representing these events and kind of career engagements on your resume. How does that look, right? So, and how to best represent that, which is pretty cool. And we'll talk about that at the end. To start though, real quick, I just want to talk about some data points, which I think kind of help, break the ice in a way. So, and kind of give us some insight as to where we're going with the workforce and the world of work, right? So I call this a note on the remote. So recent research shows that the skepticism many companies had about working from home may be eroding, actually. This is from higheredjobs.com, which is where a lot of folks in the higher education world go to for stats and data. But they said 94% of 800 employers surveyed by Mercer, which is a HR consulting firm, said that productivity was the same as or higher than it was before the pandemic, even with their employees working remotely. So, there is an argument, there is data out there. This isn't the only piece of data I've seen, but there is data out there that people are working harder now more than ever while working remote. And we can, debate that for the length and the long haul as to why that is. I think one reason in particular is a lot of us are, a lot of people in the workforce are having trouble separating, work from home and things like that. Your office is all in the same room. And as a student, right, maybe you empathize with this point that you're online learning, maybe you're working just as hard too, right? Or if not harder. That's a piece of feedback I've heard from many students I've met with because, you are learning online and that's where maybe you're in your desk or at your desk at home, and that's where also sleep and eat and things like that. So I think the virtual world, although maybe easy or very nice in the sense that it's accessible, is all making us kind of work a lot harder. Some other quick data points I plugged from a Gallup poll that was done at the end of 2020 is that remote work leads to better business outcomes, actually, which I thought was an interesting point. And the reason why we're talking about remote, right, just the larger picture that connects to virtual engagement and virtual events. But in this Gallup 2020 report, they said remote workers are 20 to 25% more productive than on-site colleagues. They also said 85% of businesses, apologize there, say that implementing flexible work locations have made their company more productive. 90% of employees say flexibility in work arrangements contribute to better morale. So I think what we're going to see here, and you may not see it right now as a student, but maybe by the time some of you graduate, whether that's this year or in years to come, is a lot of companies announcing that they will give a remote or working remote option, I guess, or working from home, type of option when it comes to the job. I wouldn't see this, I wouldn't make this prediction. It's a bold prediction, but I wouldn't make it in all industries across the board. I think certain industries will have that option, but I think you can definitely make your case to work remote, as many were able to do when um, everything went sideways, a couple months back. So interesting point there. I thought the one that was actually the most interesting is um, the productivity, that second point. People, again, more productive, they're maybe working harder, that separation piece, like I said earlier, a lot of different factors there. Okay, now to jump into and transition here to virtual interviewing one-on-one, right? Everyone knows this in a way. I hope you all know it, that you're listening, virtual interviewing, what to expect. Like I said earlier, interviews are, and nowadays, virtual interviews are virtual engagements and considered virtual engagements, right? So when it comes time to applying for a job or looking for a job, you'll take the normal steps and processes, right? Where you will look for the job. Maybe it's on Hire Red Hawk, maybe it's on Indeed, another job portal website. You apply, submit the necessary documents, complete the application with your name, all that stuff. But most likely you'll probably be asked to, if things were to move along after you do apply, you'll probably be asked to meet with a team member, a recruiter, maybe the hiring manager, through just naming these big three. I call them one of these three venues: Zoom, which we all know this is how we're meeting right now, right? Doing the webinar via Zoom. Cisco WebEx is another kind of software that's out there, as well as Skype. So you definitely, Microsoft Teams is another one too as well, or Google Meet and Hangout. So you definitely want to make sure when you are applying to positions, and I should say actually when you do get that next step, if you do get an interview, that you have whatever software the employer is going to connect with you with. So if they're going to request for you to have an interview via Zoom, you want to make sure you have Zoom as a software on your end and kind of laptop. So and I'm not going to get too much into, again, I think virtual interviewing 101 in itself is a really large topic, and we do have webinars that are out there. The Central Career Services team has some webinars. If you search Montclair State University Career Services in YouTube, you can see a lot of their playlists that talk about, best practices in regards to looking, at the camera, right, to make eye contact, which I know is weird, but is good practice, kind of show that you're engaged. Dressing professional, right, no distractions in the background, which actually leads us to the next slide, right? Quick other tips here. I'm including that little animation to the right because this was one of the this is one of the most viral I think video clips that happened. This may have been even before the pandemic actually took place, but this big time political diplomat I think was on BBC, and out of nowhere, two of his children, kind of waltzed in, and one on the walker I think is hilarious, and then the nanny and caretaker came, bolting in to grab them out. Um, so virtual interviewing, right? Let's say you get the next step, you apply to something, you get the gig. Um, you know, you want to make sure that you're practicing beforehand, right? Do a trial run before the interview. Practice, practice, practice. That makes perfect, right? And I'll plug our services. You can come make an appointment with one of us, right? CHSS Career Services. We can kind of assist you, in preparing for that. And also Hire Red Hawk can too as well, which I'll get into in a little bit in the next few slides. But practice is key because you want to avoid any sort of technical problems too. And when practicing, if possible, use the same video technology, like I said a few moments ago, that you'll be using during the actual interview. This way you won't have any, last minute installation issues, password problems. You want to make sure you did your software update for Zoom, right? And everything is good to go there. I spoke about this briefly as well. Camera angles, right? You want to make sure your camera angle is at eye level, not above or below. A poorly placed camera can result in unflattering angle or weird shadows, right? So try to ensure that you have some good lighting, all that, is in check there. And your ideal background, right? That's tidy, distraction free, no children running around, quiet, well lit. That all plays a major factor into making a good impression, right? Because that's what this is all about, first impression. So definitely want to dress professionally too. If you want to go the whole nine, all the way down, I think that's the best practice, right? Kind of a look good, feel good mentality. It's like a mindset in a way. But obviously, if you want to just do from the waist up, that's fine too. Just keep in mind that, if you are wearing sweats or something under, don't stand up. Make sure that your camera is off when you move and the interview is over. So yeah, you just want to make sure that everything is great there. And like I said, Hire Red Hawk has a mock interview module in case you do want to practice this. It's not with a real person. There's like scripted kind of interviewers that could ask questions, which is pretty cool. So I'll walk you through here real quick how to access that. So if you log into Hire Red Hawk, which you hopefully all know, which is great, that's our online job portal system where a lot of resources are located. You will log in through your Nest account. You click Career Services. Then there's another little window that says Hire Red Hawk. Brings you to the home page of Hire Red Hawk, right? When you log in automatically when you click that button. Along the left side, you will see a resources tab here, and it's called resources, and has a drop down of all really helpful stuff. Resource library, document library, that's where a lot of our like resume templates and CHSS resume guideline is, which is really cool. But there's a mock interview module too as well. And there's kind of scripted interviewers, I should say, based off of your needs and concerns, and what are you looking to kind of practice, that you can record yourself and walk through those mock interviews in a way, which is really cool. So you can do it as many times as you want. You can submit it for revision, which is great. Then we get notified, and we can give you some, comments based off of your answers. So how it works pretty much is it'll ask you to practice first. This way you have an idea as to how it'll work. And then I believe some of them have 10 questions, some of them have 12 questions. They'll walk you through it. Uh, you hit start or commence, and someone asks you the questions. You record your answer, and then you hit finish. It'll end. You submit. You move on to the next question. So, but take it serious, right? The more you take the exercise serious, the better the results will be. It's just better practice overall for you. I recommend using it and doing it because it gets you kind of acclimated with looking into the camera in a way. Even though that person is not really looking back at you. It's again, like I said, these are banked, pre-recorded. That's the best way to describe it. Interviewers that are asking you questions. But again, right? Practice makes perfect. The more you take it serious, the better the outcome, will be. So we do have those there. Those are just a few, by the way. Focus on creativity, initiative, and goals. Decision making. If you want a basic internships one, that's there too, as well. So transitioning to actual preparing for virtual events, right? I know this is a webinar based, type of event, so I don't think you have the accessibility to turn on your camera, but maybe for other events, right, such as a career fair or an info session, these are some of the questions and kind of prep that you want to ask yourself. So one being, will your camera be on or off? Regardless, right, if the answer is, yes, let's say to that, you want to check your surroundings if a camera option is being offered even too, right? Because in a way now with virtual, we're all giving everyone, no matter if they're a student, a colleague, an interviewer, an employer, job seeker, recruiter, I just use a lot of those interchangeably, but you're giving them an insight into your home, into your kind of personal life in a way. So you want to make sure everything is, tidy up, on the home front or wherever you're, posting up when you do eventually engage in these events. Secondly, really important, you want to do your research. Look up the company, look up the presenter in advance, right? Uh, you know, uh, I think most importantly, this is a connection here. We are going to have a virtual career fair at some point in the semester, later on in the semester. So you definitely want to, when that becomes public knowledge, you can see who is coming in Hire Red Hawk, and kind of do your research and look up the employer that way. This way, you're really best prepared and take note as to what they're looking to fulfill, what they're looking to recruit for. So that's just a really, really good practice. And that's a good practice to do even if you have the knowledge, on a job seeking front, if you know who you're going to interview with, right? If you know the interviewer and who you're going to be speaking to, look them up. What is their role in the company, right? uh, you know, Maybe there's some insight there that you can gain and kind of make a connection in that way. Third point, I'm sorry, self-check with your comfort level with the unknown, right? So be, be flexible with your level of engagement. It's okay to not meet all of your expectations, right? So what I mean by that is just because you're in an event, again, whatever it may be, it's okay that it's okay that you don't engage. The level of expectation isn't there that you always have to be engaging with someone. The event, if you're just there for information gathering, kind of listen, be that sponge, right, absorbing info, then that's fine. uh, but I think there should be no level of expectation going into an event that you have to ask, 2 to 3 questions, or you have to, chat the, presenter a couple times. So I think it's okay to kind of go in, and especially if you just want to be there to learn and be like a fly on the wall, so to speak, that's totally fine. Lastly, consider following up with your speaker and presenters. And right, this is a good practice to do even when you're going through a interview process, whether it be virtual or in person. Um, you can engage with them in a chat feature if that's a possibility or function to see if it's fair game to. I would take it even one step further if you wanted to send them a LinkedIn request. If you're a LinkedIn user, you can, it's a good way to keep in touch, right? LinkedIn, right? Keeping your finger on the pulse, see what their activity is, what they're sharing on LinkedIn. So I definitely wouldn't send the request while presenting. I think that's a little too soon, but definitely at the conclusion of the presentation, if there's an opportunity to ask the presenter, if there's a way to keep in touch, you can do that. Sometimes presenters straight up will share their, email contact information too. So that's something to keep in mind, that way. So again, a lot of similarities here to what I'm saying to what are really good and best practices to do when it comes to an interview, right? So definitely keep that in mind. So where to look, right? Where to look for these virtual engagements that I'm describing, right? One of them, you're already here. I said it, right, earlier. A webinar through Hire Red Hawk, right? All of those, all of our webinars, the career fair, employer information sessions that are going to be ongoing throughout the semester. Those are all considered virtual engagements. Uh, I'm bolding the top two, Hire Red Hawk and LinkedIn, because those are ones that I strongly recommend. They're great. And LinkedIn, we're going to get into in a couple more slides and then wrap up. LinkedIn in itself, I'm not saying you have to drop everything right now and get an account. You know, if you have one, awesome. Kudos to you. If you don't, you may want to consider getting one. And that's something that, you know, I would recommend making an appointment with us and we can walk you through, you know, how to create a profile and get on there. But LinkedIn is a really awesome professional and career development platform that has a lot of virtual engagements, workshops, information sessions, job seekers that want to just be, you know, that are just giving and recruiters, I should say, job coaches giving best advice for job seekers. So really, really great place. I'm throwing Twitter and Facebook as honorable mentions on there. Twitter, right? Maybe you see something that someone retweets or kind of shares. Um, Most likely it'll probably connect you out of the platform into another kind of media. So, but if case you're on Twitter, you know, you can be following a lot of the, you know, the thinkers and doers and see if they're sharing or presenting or speaking at any sort of, you know, upcoming panel. That's always something to keep in mind there. Facebook too, as well, believe it or not. Facebook, right, as we all know, it's good for, you know, it's good and bad for many reasons, but you know, it's good for keeping in touch, you know, with a lot of people. But there may be some engagements on there, some workshops. It was a way to see, right, pre-pandemic days, you know, what concerts or who's coming to your town near you at what time, so you could always, you know, say that you're interested in that event and, you know, get tickets, right? Similar kind of idea. You know, maybe there's some events that are ongoing virtually that you want to check out. I have seen from time to time some things posted on Facebook. So, but I would stick with, like I said earlier, the top two, Hire Red Hawk and LinkedIn are the best. So for Hire Red Hawk, you may know where to look, right? Best practices here. You've all done it before. You know, you would go to career events. When you hit that, it drops down, career fairs, information sessions is then, you know, one point, and then workshops as well. The other thing I want to highlight here that you'll see on the screen is it's a screenshot, actually, I'm sorry, from my email inbox, excuse me, that is from an email called Red Hawk News. Keep in mind, you get Red Hawk News emails a lot. We all do. Every time you get one, we get one too. But the Red Hawk News sends a note bi-weekly, um, every other week that has a career tag on there. So it'll usually start in the subject line with the word career. This most recent one that I snagged and took as a screenshot said career, do what you love. I would highly, highly recommend looking at this email. They're always sent on Sundays. Check it out. It outlines a whole bunch of events, workshops, kind of what's going on in the land of career services and what is being offered to you as a student. You know, employer info sessions that are up and coming, things like that. It also, though, further down in the email will show what most recent or kind of fresh job postings have been made available on Hire Red Hawk. And those are hyperlinked that if something did catch your interest, you can click it, it'll automatically log you in, you know, from that email into the system. If you were to do that, by the way, probably best to do it on a computer. I don't recommend doing it on your phone. It gets a little wonky sometimes, but definitely keep an eye out on that email because there's a lot of really good stuff there to, you know, kind of unpack. So the second place, like I said, we have Hire Red Hawk. The second place, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is massive. So where to look? You know, LinkedIn is huge because Not only can you search up top on LinkedIn for people, right, to make connections with and jobs, but you can also filter out by events. So if there's any, which I think there are actually, if there's any psych majors among us, I'm just going to single you all out as an example. I was a psych major too, so what's up? Psych majors unite. You can type in up top psychology, and you can get a whole bunch of, psych related events that are coming up. I did in this case in the screenshot you're looking at right now, some of them already passed, right? These dates, but I searched job tips, job advice. And these were some of the kind of online webinars that popped up. So so they're out there, they're out there. You can do it industry based, like I said, psychology is a huge, industry as a whole and goes into so many different avenues. Um, but there's no crystal ball or kind of right way to do this. So if you type in any word, you may get a really good result, or you may get something that's a little too specific. So I try to steer clear of doing something that's a little too detail oriented. Kind of the larger words will yield better results. An example of that, right? If you type in human resources, I'm sure you'll get, in case you're interested in, the human resources world, you'll get a lot of jobs, that way too. So really, really awesome and underutilized tool. The other way you can kind of leverage LinkedIn and look for virtual events is through your own network, right? Montclair State University, networking ideas. MSU, right? You can search Montclair State University on LinkedIn. You can go to the alumni tab once you're there, and you'll see, right? We have a healthy amount of alumni, 95,000. That's awesome. Scarily, I think like 3 years ago, that was at like 89,000. So it's like definitely increased, which is pretty wild. But it breaks it down into these tabs as to where are people living, where they work on LinkedIn. And then if you move the arrow a step further, it'll tell me what they do and what they studied. This is all free, by the way. This idea and feature of LinkedIn, super free. It's not super free, it is free. But you definitely want to not only look for events, when it comes to job seeking, internship seeking, whatever, or wherever you are on your, road of career and professional development or journey. You definitely, though, want to leverage your network. Networking remains to be the #1 job seeking tool that you can use, right? So we have Indeed, we have Hire Red Hawk, there's other job portal sites out there, but networking, #1 above all of those. I can't stress enough, it's who you know in what industry. So if you happen to know, even on your own, in your own personal network, a friend of an aunt or friend of an uncle, whatever it may be, your cousin's friend that's at a particular industry that you're interested in, make that connection with them. Reach out to them, have a conversation. Your professors, right? They're a great networking kind of tool too, as well. Reach out to them as well. They may have their finger on the pulse better than we do, even in regard to a particular industry or line of work. So, so LinkedIn is great, but I definitely shouldn't stop there. Is my point being? It shouldn't just end at LinkedIn. It should always be an ongoing thing. And having these conversations could be an ongoing thing too. I think it's great. We're always continuing to learn as individuals, as humans. We could always do better at what we do and be better at what we do in a way. So, you definitely want to, look into that. So, real quick though, this next slide, I believe we're getting towards the end here, just kind of breaks down as to what you could be saying when you do make those connections with people on LinkedIn. The reason why I was directing you all to the Montclair State University network, obviously, is because this you are in the Montclair State University network, simply put, and you will be an alumni one day. So these are considered warm connections when you connect and send a request to connect with someone that's a part of the MSU alumni network. So when you do connect with someone, you do have a certain amount of characters to use. So keep that in mind. You're limited with what you could say, but this is just an example. that I think is really nice to use here. So hi, Ms. Verna, I'm just using Nadine, right, our director as an example. My name is Jeff Poulos. I'm interested in learning more about your higher education background, in particular your experience in career services, because that's Nadine's background, right? Hypothetically, if I was reading her profile, and your work with liberal arts and social sciences students at MSU. I'm currently looking to pursue a graduate degree in higher ed and student affairs, and I was wondering if you had any tips for seeking a program which will best prepare me for a position in career services. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to connecting with you soon. Sincerely, Jeff. So this comes in different shapes and sizes. This could be an email to the individual. This could be, like I said, I'm using it in through the LinkedIn kind of context of examples there. But you definitely want to, make those connections and see, how that person could serve as some insight into an industry before you start really heavily investing and looking into that industry. So, uh, so I think, like I said earlier, networking is definitely the leading job tool, at your disposal. Remains to be the number one most successful kind of utilized resource in that regard. And when you do make these requests, this is what I was going to say as one last note on LinkedIn. You do roll the dice. It is risky, right? Because you we don't know the person in real life, right? But that's what we're all there on LinkedIn to do, is kind of connect and build your network and kind of learn from each other. But two, you roll the dice in the sense that you may never hear from that person, and that's okay. That's okay. I always recommend and advise connecting with people that do have a photo. I kind of call people that don't have photos ghosts. We don't know if they're really leveraging LinkedIn as much as you know we think they are. But you know, you may hear from someone, you may not. You may hear from them, and they may say, "Hey, I don't know anyone in this area, but I'm going to put you in touch with someone that is better suited." So keep that in mind. Last point here connects to the last topic in a way. What I shared with you earlier is when it comes to your resume, right? In the event you want to include professional development on your resume, and how does that look, right? Or these virtual career kind of engagements, or these virtual engagements, I should say, right? Call it its own category. If you have the real estate and space, resumes, right? My general gist, and this is true across really, in a way, any industry, a resume should be one page. But if you have the real estate and space, you can call and create your own section and call it professional development or career development. Another place where this could live too is a subcategory of education, right? Maybe there you have a certification section that could live within the subcategory there. So it would be as a subcategory of your MSU experience. Uh, Either option you do, I would just ensure that there's some sort of consistency in format. So, for example, if you're going to use professional development and have it live on its own in its own section, try to be consistent with how you have your experience section structured. For example, if you have your employer in bold and your job title in italics, you would want to do the same approach with the professional development. So you can put the title of the workshop you attended in bold and treat that as the employer. And then I would put the title that you didn't have a formal title because you just were an attendee, but you can put member, participant, attendee, and you can put the month and the date that you did that, at that particular time, and ensure it all aligns with the rest of your document. So other places, excuse me, and honorable mentions where this could also live is under maybe a summary section of your LinkedIn profile, right? That's a really good way, an area there. LinkedIn, right, gives you the ability in the beginning when you're creating your profile to create a summary section for yourself, kind of like a trailer to the movie. Think of it in that regard, right? Before I continue reading this profile, what does the person want me to do? How are they inviting me to read the profile, right, in a way? Or there's another section, maybe you include it under accomplishments. So it's really tailored to your need, your concern, very situational based, and things like that. So But a quick last pro tip here, and I think this is something to consider, adding any sort of professional development, career development section or category to the resume is a great way to incorporate keywords into your resume that are used heavily in the industry. So one thing you may or may not know is when you are applying to jobs, your resume is going through a computer software. They call those applicant tracking systems, where your resume is being scanned and pinned against the job description. And it's looking for how many times you are mentioning certain keywords in your resume versus how many times it's being mentioned on the job, in the job description, I should say. I'm sorry. So, for example, if the job description, mentions community building, 4 times, and your resume only mentions it once, that may be read in the software scan as not a really strong applicant. So consider professional development as a way that you can kind of incorporate maybe more of those keywords. Another strategy I've shared, and many times I share this, is incorporating relevant coursework. Right, you can use the titles of the courses that you've done your best work, and connect it in that way to the amount of keywords that are being used in the job description. Uh, so I think in a way, not saying, again, I'm not advocating that you have to necessarily have this section on your resume, but if it makes most sense, if you need help completing the page, right, and kind of making it filled out in a way, and you have the real estate and space, why not add it? You know, keep that in mind. All right, so I am just going to stop our recording here.